Daily Detroit is brought to you in large part by our members at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Get swag, access to our member-only Discord chat, and know that you're supporting local media. After all, local media cannot survive without local support. So join us at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Monday, September 16th, 2024. And to kick off the week, we've always got a heck of a show for you. Joining me is Steve Freese, freelance journalist for the New York Times, Newsweek, and many others, and writes the weekly newsletter for the Ann Arbor Observer. It's called the A2 View. I'll put links in the show notes. Steve, always good to talk to you and kind of watch what's happening here with politics in Michigan, which, you know, I want to reinforce people. Maybe we should start here. Like, Michigan is a really big deal, and I think people should really kind of internalize that. Like, things really matter here this year.
It does. I think that when you live in a swing state, as Michigan has been for a long time, in fact, probably within our living memory, it always has been, a swing state to the extent that is either close or it could go either way. We don't recognize that it's not everybody in the country who's getting all of these ads. There are people in the United States who go through the entire campaign without ever seeing a locally produced or locally aired ad for either presidential candidate. If you live in the South, for the most part, if you live on the West Coast, for the most part, you're not going to see the stuff that we get to see. We get to see it all. We have the front row view of the election. We matter as much more, actually, than most other voters. And so we get all of this stuff. And I know it gets tedious, particularly like when I'm watching a football game and on a stream and they start showing ads during the break, and for some reason there's a glitch and you see the same Kamala ad 3 times in a row or
same Trump ad.
Other one. I mean, has that happened to you?
All the time, especially on YouTube. But all
totally,
the time, and I watch
totally
Tubi.
A digital problem, yeah,
totally, because there's not enough inventory to fill all the ad slots in many cases. And this is something just kind of behind the scenes with media. There's usually not enough inventory, and right now, the campaigns will buy every single shred of inventory that they can. So right. I'll see it on Tubi, I'll see it on YouTube, anywhere where there's anything digital, or if you go to a news website and there's a pre-roll, it's just a huge wall of these ads. It's almost like, okay, I get the point already. We're important.
Well, what's interesting is when it comes to television ads, and this is, again, inside baseball, but I think people sometimes are interested in this stuff. People don't realize a lot of things that go on with this. One is that the candidates, when they take out their campaigns, take ads on broadcast television, at least, the networks have to, or the local affiliates have to give them basically the cheapest rate. But when the super PACs take ads, the networks can jack up the rates. When you see all of those super PACs doing those ads, that's good money for those TV stations. They prefer that over the candidate ads because they don't have to limit the rates. The other thing I was going to say is that, so we see all this stuff, and in addition to that, everybody comes here. And they will be here over and over again over the course of the next several weeks. We will see them all. We will see, and it's convenient geographically that the swing states, most of them are right next to each other.
We can just do a big circle.
Right. It's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania with, whatever. And then North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. Is that it? Is New Hampshire still considered one? I guess.
I guess, but I don't really think of it. And then there's that one.
Georgia.
It's Georgia. And then there's that one electoral vote that's up for grabs. I want to say.
Nebraska.
Yeah, Nebraska. Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody's descending upon Omaha.
Right. So this past week, Tim Walz was in Michigan. He was in Grand Rapids and Lansing, and the purpose of that was to hit 2 different media markets. Kamala Harris, we saw on the news, she's going to be coming here in a few days to be interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. You got to think that this is going to be very much a conversation about probably that race, probably to some extent, that would be the right forum for them to be talking about the significance of such a groundbreaking campaign. But then I'm sure Oprah will go all over the place and, talk about Kamala Harris's favorite coffee or whatever they do.
Yeah. I mean, so this is going to be happening on Thursday, September 19th, 8 p.m., according to the Michigan Chronicle, at an undisclosed location in Metro Detroit. What I think this interview with Oprah might do is help fill in that story gap for Kamala Harris, where a lot of people, they're interested, but they don't feel like they know her very well because, look, you can sit in the vice presidency forever and kind of be like no one would know that you're there in a lot of ways. And so they don't have the same knowledge about her. And I think for some undecided voters, that's going to be really important. And as far as that background stuff, there might be some policy points, but you're really going to get a more personal interview with an Oprah Winfrey.
Right. That is kind of useful because it's hard for campaigns to tell their candidate story when they're also doing so many other things. I mean, this is a campaign that is doing a year's worth of campaigning in a few months and a year's worth of introduction. And it's difficult, you hear the candidate talking about themselves and, oh, I did this, I did that, or whatever it is. And I don't know, it sounds a little bit awkward, but when Oprah asks you, well, okay, we'll do that. So is it going to be on television on Thursday, or are they just creating it Thursday? It's not going to be live, right?
No, it's going to be a live stream as part of her Unite for America program is what she's calling it.
Huh.
So it'll be a virtual event.
Oh, so it's not even on television. It's just online.
Yeah. So this will be on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch. And there will be about 400 local voters in person to attend the discussion.
So it's sort of like a town hall type thing?
I mean, I would guess, but I imagine with it being Oprah Winfrey, she's going to be it's going to be her leading it as opposed to a traditional town hall where you've got some journalists, then you go to the questions or whatever. It'll be interesting to see how this actually, this makes me think of a criticism I've heard of the Harris campaign and sometimes of the Trump campaign that there's not enough sit-down interviews with Harris. You hear a lot of that in the traditional media class. I see that a lot online. How do you feel about that? Do they feel like she's not sitting in for enough interviews, for enough conversations?
She should be doing more. I don't ever suggest less as a journalist.
Right.
More is better. And she's certainly shown, from the debate and other settings that she can hold her own. I was really rooting for a second debate with Trump on Fox with Sean Hannity as moderator. I mean, that would be amazing. She would do great, and all these whiners would have to, I don't know, that would be, she could do it, But there is an economy to her time in this particular period. And my understanding is that while the national media doesn't count it, because for whatever reason they don't, she's done a bunch of drive time radio stuff that gets no coverage in swing state markets. And she just did a sit down on camera with the ABC affiliate in Philadelphia. I think we'll see more. I'm sure she'll do some in the markets that matter. But, the campaigns have only a certain amount of time. And she is out there doing her thing. I don't know. It would be better if she did more, for sure. I, however, will be at Disney on Ice on Thursday night. So I will not get the first experience of Oprah and Kamala. I hope that they have set up the technology to handle it, because every time Elon Musk tries to do one of these things, it falls apart before it starts. We'll see what happens. Anyway, they're all coming here. They're all doing this type of thing. I will say this about the debate. We can talk about it a little bit, but the one thing I noticed, nothing about Michigan during the debate.
Right? Absolutely nothing.
Not even a shout out to Michigan as part of the, there was a lot about Pennsylvania. The thing took place there. But I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how there was nothing about auto workers. There was nothing about anything specific to our state.
Not even in a roundabout way. So they mentioned about, both candidates talked about eliminating taxes on tipped wages, which That's my own personal opinion is I think that's a bipartisanly bad deal. But like there wasn't any real talk about the minimum wage, which would be like a very big union talking point, you know? Like it was a very big like let's run to the middle for Harris. And yeah, it wasn't even in a roundabout way. And I was like, okay, this is interesting to me to not see those specific issues addressed. Honestly, by either candidate, we got distracted and ended up talking about Haitians and dogs, apparently.
Yeah, I mean,
Debunked claims, by the way, 100% debunked claims.
yeah, they weren't doing that. It's not true. And not only is it not true, but it's become very dangerous for the people who live in that city in Ohio because, the crazies are out to get those folks.
How do you think that the debate, now that we're a week or so out, impacted things? One local poll that I saw of Michigan voters, Steve Mitchell, puts them tied at 48%, even though the majority of people in this poll, 56%, said that Harris won. But there's different snapshots in different places of the country, and I think this ties back to a couple things. One, our conversation about polling earlier. Two, the fascination people have with polls, because the reason I'm mentioning this is that a number of listeners sent me this clip about this poll, and it's like, the polls aren't very good, but we can't stop watching the polls. It's kind of crazy, Steve.
Elections have been turned into these sort of, obviously, horse races, but also these sports events in a way. It's no fun. It's not interesting. It's maddening if you were to watch a football game without anybody telling you what the score is. And so polls have become this crutch that the media and the public have come to rely on to, I don't know, create a narrative, to create a story, to have something to say. Even though they're frequently wrong, and even though they change, even though the statistics of these polls make them relatively useless because of how wide the margins of error are, it still feels like something concrete. It still feels like a piece of data. It can really mess with your head. It can really push you one way or another, for a whole day or a few days. If you are really invested in a certain candidate doing well and you get a poll that suggests that they're quote unquote behind, even if you can intellectually tell yourself that it doesn't mean anything because of all the reasons we've already discussed this week and last week and probably other weeks, it's still very difficult and it can really ruin a day. You can really spend your day looking for some other piece of data that will make you feel better.
Yeah, I see the same kind of issue a little bit with lawn signs. So a listener downriver told me about their community. They see Trump signs everywhere and they're really worried and whatever, but nobody bothered to look and see that actually that community voted 54% for Biden, right? But the Trump lawn signs were really loud, and so it felt like that's how things were. And there's just like this cognitive dissonance where we've got so many people bowling alone, right? Whether they're in social media and whatever, or they're driving their neighborhood and they just see like the snapshot of the loudest. And it just feels more and more untethered as we go on from whatever reality actually is. And I keep being concerned about it as somebody who works around journalism and cares about, information and making sure we're talking about shared facts and all that other stuff. There's an emotional aspect to this of the loudest getting the most attention.
Well, look, one of the talking points, one of the pieces of quote unquote evidence that the Stop the Steal folks pushed, one of the reasons why a lot of people who voted for Trump refused to accept the results of the election was because all along they're seeing these huge crowds and all of the Trump paraphernalia, and they're not seeing the same kind of thing for, in that case, Biden. It just escapes them that other people might have a significantly different opinion, but they don't feel like going out to a rally. It's not a cultural event for them. It's just their political opinion. These pieces of evidence that we take in to tell ourselves how things are going are usually pretty anecdotal and usually pretty sketchy. I don't know why I have a significant sense that the Democratic Party is going to do better than these polls show in this election, other than that since Dobbs, it just has been the case that they're constantly overperforming since the abortion ruling. So I'm taking that into this election and then adding onto it all of Trump's distressing characteristics that brought people to vote for Biden in the first place when they may not have agreed with Biden. I mean, the people who went to Biden in 2020, they were just exhausted and dismayed and disgusted by the daily drumbeat of Trump chaos, are now, I think, as the campaign is coming to its close, remembering that and asking themselves, is that really what I want to go back to? Do I really want to do this for another 4 years? Because if she's president, and even if I don't agree with her, she's not going to be crazy. Biden wasn't crazy. He may have disagreed with some of what he did or whatever, but it didn't have any kind of emotional hold on everybody every day the way that a Trump presidency did and will. So, I just feel like there are common sense reasons why I just think that she's got it. And I don't have that much emotional attachment to the polling. A lot of people do. It's very hard. Or emotional attachment to whatever visual signs they may see. Now she's got big crowds. So I guess that means what? I don't know. Today on Facebook, somebody said to me, well, you're just a stupid person and he's a billionaire, so he must be smarter than you. I'm like, okay, well, how does that work then? Because Oprah has more money than he does. So does that mean that she is more right than he is? I mean,
right, that's silly season because how much money you have is an indicator of how good you are at making money, not whether or not you're smart.
Right. Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, so there's all of that. So as far as these polls go, is it close? Yeah, it's close. That's what you can take from these polls. If you have a strong opinion and you want to work hard to help the candidate you like, you should keep doing it because it's close.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to talk about this ad that is running on YouTube and digitally. A group that looks like it's connected to Republicans is running this about Vice President Kamala Harris and her husband, especially Doug Emhoff, who is Jewish. The ads talk a lot about Emhoff being Jewish, Harris supporting Israel. There's a lot of imagery there. It's widely seen by the outside world is that these ads have anti-Semitic dog whistles, but they're kind of being placed here to stir up some trouble, I think, because, we do have a very large Muslim community, and any way that a few votes can be peeled off here or there, and I know it's something that you wanted to talk about, and I think it's something to mention, right? Because this is one of those things where it's not really about the policy or whatever. It's really about, let's try to get in there and throw some sticks in the bicycle wheel, if you will.
It's anti-Semitic in as much as it is a deliberate attempt to stoke anti-Semitism in a roundabout way. These are ads that, as I understand it, I haven't seen one, I don't think. They talk about how pro-Israel Biden and Harris have been and how great it'll be to have a Jewish person in the White House. And the intent is to target Muslim and Arab voters and make them upset, make them turn on the Democratic ticket because they see this and that's not what they want. They want a president that, well, I mean, this is a theory anyway, that is anti-Israel or is pro-Palestinian or whatever. It's really sleazy is what it is.
Totally. I wanted to clarify really quick. That's actually a small series of ads, not just one ad. Okay. That hits things at different angles, and it's being very hyper targeted to two areas of Metro Detroit that have a higher Muslim population.
Right. It's intentional in a ugly way, and it should be denounced by people like Mike Rogers and John James and people, even Rashida Tlaib. I mean, the people who represent these areas or want to represent these areas who should be able to see what it is. And what it is, I don't even know if it's a dog whistle. It's just sort of this false flag. I don't know, a reverse psychology. If there's anything good about it, it's that it's so obvious as to be a little bit too cute to be all that effective. But you never know. There's always advertising or mailers that go out to usually African American communities that tell them don't forget to vote on, and give the wrong date on purpose to confuse people. And I guess it's just a matter of the Harris campaign has to step up and make sure that Muslim voters in Metro Detroit area know where she really stands, which is, I guess, so far as I know, they want a ceasefire and they want the hostages back and they want a two-state solution and they want humanitarian aid for Gaza. I'm not sure if that cuts it, but that is their actual position.
Yeah. That reminds me, you're mentioning about mailers. I want to thank the listeners who sent in the round of mailers that hit a bunch of homes in Detroit from the Michigan GOP, the state party, for Donald Trump. And I was like, hey, we're not used to seeing this much Republican lit in the city of Detroit. And I just thought it was something interesting that a number of listeners sent to me and sent me images of, with things like, we're going to rebuild cities, which I find is completely kind of laughable, but that it's out there and that there's money being spent. And I wanted to acknowledge the listeners who sent that, because I'm always looking for when people want to participate and send along things. Any quick thoughts, Steve?
No, it's another week. I think that the debate did her a lot of good. I understand that there are some polls that suggest that she has gotten a bump out of it nationally. I don't know about, in the swing states, the bump doesn't put her outside of any margins of error. So basically the race isn't any different than it was before.
Is the debate the kind of thing that it's like winning only does you so well, but you could really lose it? Like, if you look at what happened with President Joe Biden, it really knocked him out, that debate performance. And that was kind of like the worst case scenario of what can happen with the debate.
What's interesting right now is that this year, the debates have mattered so much more than I can ever remember. They were always anticipated. They were always events. They were always a big deal. But they never had this kind of impact. And I think that's partly because of how fractured the media environment is, that the one moment, the one period where we're all watching the same thing for an hour or two. In the case of Joe Biden, the Democrats saw what they saw and said, holy crap, this is awful, and admitted it, went on a couple of weeks of trying to figure out what to do about it until they solved it. Whereas the Republicans, or at least the serious Trumpers, they're buying all of the excuses. It's like, nothing to see here. You didn't see what you just saw. And what you saw was that he was just being led around by the vice president, who could say a word, and off he'd go into some tangent. On Pod Save America, John Lovett said, and this series did crack me up, he said it was a little bit like those Tom and Jerry cartoons where Jerry would draw a tunnel on the side of a brick wall, and Tom would just run right into it.
Well, we did learn definitively that Donald Trump does not like Taylor Swift.
Today, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, how do you argue that this is a serious person when he does that? I mean, Taylor Swift has as much right as anybody else to say what she thinks about who she likes. It's certainly disappointing, I'm sure, to the candidate who she didn't pick. But so what?
Yeah.
That's her business. It's a free country, I think, for now.
Well, Steve Freese, I appreciate you and your efforts as we talk about what is still a very free country when it comes to the United States of America. Steve is a freelance journalist for the New York Times, Newsweek, and many others. Writes the newsletter for the Ann Arbor Observer. You can check it out. I put it in the show notes, as I said at the top of the show. Steve Freese, always good to talk to you.
Thanks a lot. See you next week.
Absolutely. See you next week. And see you all tomorrow with another episode of Your Daily Detroit. I really appreciate you. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.